Jack Morrison had lived alone on his Montana ranch for 20 years, finding peace in the simple rhythms of farm life. At 62, he thought he knew everything about delivering new life into the world, having helped countless animals give birth over the decades. But on a stormy night in April, a car's desperate honking at his front gate would prove him wrong. Inside was Sarah Taylor, a woman clearly in labor, clutching her stomach and fighting through contractions. What Jack didn't know was that just 6 months ago, she had been one of the wealthiest women in America. Now she had nothing left except the precious life she was fighting to bring into the world. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Thunder rattled the barn's weathered boards as Jack helped the stranger inside, supporting her weight with practiced ease. Her breathing came in sharp gasps, each contraction closer than the last. The storm had knocked out cell service. Not that it was reliable on good days this far out. "Let's get you somewhere warm," he said, leading her toward the house. His boots left muddy prints on the worn path, memories of another rainy night when he'd rushed his wife Martha to the hospital. Too late, as it turned out. That was 20 years ago. The woman groaned, doubling over. I can't make it that far." "Then we'll make do right here." Jack's voice remained steady, though his heart raced. He'd delivered countless foals and calves, but never a human baby. Still, birth was birth. The principles weren't so different. He grabbed the old lantern from its hook. Electric lights were too harsh for birthing animals anyway, and quickly cleared space in the clean straw. From the storage chest, he pulled out Martha's last quilting project, a baby blanket she'd never finished. He'd kept it all these years, unable to part with it. "I'm Jack Morrison," he said, helping the woman settle onto the makeshift bed. "And you are?" "Sarah," she managed between breaths. "Sarah, just Sarah." Her hands clutched at the straw, face contorted in pain. Jack nodded, accepting the partial truth. Everyone had their reasons for secrets out here. "Well, just Sarah, let's focus on bringing this little one into the world." He tried the emergency radio he kept for storms, but static was his only answer. The nearest hospital was 40 miles away, might as well be on the moon tonight. "Is there someone I should try to contact? Family?" Sarah's laugh turned into a sob. "There's no one, not anymore." The words hung heavy in the lantern light as another contraction hit. Jack pushed questions aside, focusing on what needed doing. He'd seen this dance of new life hundreds of times, knew its rhythm in his bones. "All right then, we'll do this together. You're not alone." He spoke in the same gentle tone he used with frightened mares, keeping his movements calm and deliberate as he prepared what supplies he could gather. Hours blurred together in the storm-wrapped barn. Sarah proved as stubborn as any of his horses, fighting through each contraction with gritted determination. When fear crept into her eyes, Jack shared stories of difficult deliveries with happy endings, of midnight vigils rewarded by dawn's first cry. The baby started crowning just as the storm reached its peak. Wind howled through the rafters, but in their small circle of lantern light, time seemed to stand still. "Almost there," Jack encouraged, Martha's unfinished blanket ready in his hands. "One more push, Sarah, just one more." With a final, powerful effort, Sarah brought her daughter into the world. The baby's first cry pierced the storm's fury, strong and defiant. Jack wrapped her in Martha's blanket, the soft yarn finally fulfilling its purpose after all these years. "She's perfect," he said, placing the tiny bundle in Sarah's trembling arms. "Healthy as any filly I ever delivered." Sarah's tears mixed with rain, blown in through the barn's gaps as she cradled her daughter. The storm was already beginning to ease, as if it too recognized that its work was done. Jack busied himself with cleanup, giving mother and child their moment, but he couldn't help noticing how Sarah held herself even in exhaustion, like someone used to boardrooms rather than barns. Her hands, though dirty now, showed signs of careful maintenance, and there was something about her face that tugged at his memory, like a photograph seen in passing. As dawn's first light crept under the barn door, Sarah finally spoke again. "Thank you." Her voice carried weight beyond simple gratitude. "I don't know what I would have done if—" "No need to dwell on might-have-beens," Jack said, adjusting the blanket around the sleeping baby. "Welcome to Circle Pine Ranch, both of you." Morning sunlight filtered through the farmhouse windows, catching dust motes that danced above the old rocking chair where Sarah sat nursing her newborn. Jack had insisted they move from the barn once the storm cleared, his gentle stubbornness leaving no room for argument. Now, wrapped in one of his late wife's quilts, Sarah felt an unfamiliar sense of safety. The rocking chair's familiar creak filled the kitchen as she swayed. Jack had apologized for its worn appearance, explaining how Martha had spent countless evenings here reading mystery novels. But Sarah found comfort in its imperfections, so different from the stark leather and chrome that had surrounded her former life. "Hope you don't mind instant coffee," Jack said, setting a steaming mug nearby. "Town's a fair drive, and I wasn't expecting company." Sarah smiled, adjusting the baby against her shoulder. "After last night, you could serve me mud, and I'd be grateful." "Give it time. My coffee's been called worse." His weathered face creased with humor as he settled into a kitchen chair, keeping a respectful distance. The baby stirred, making tiny snuffling sounds. In the morning light, Sarah could finally study her daughter properly. 10 perfect fingers, 10 perfect toes, and a dusting of dark hair that definitely came from her side of the family. Not that the other side mattered anymore. "She'll need a name," Jack ventured carefully. Sarah traced her daughter's cheek with one finger. "Emma," she said softly. "I've always liked Emma." Jack nodded approvingly. "Strong name. Simple. Simple sounds. Perfect right now." Sarah winced as she shifted position, her body reminding her of last night's ordeal. "The roads should be clear enough for driving soon," Jack said, watching her discomfort. "I can take you to the hospital in town, have them check you both over proper." Fear flickered across Sarah's face before she could hide it. "I don't want to impose any further. Maybe I could just call a taxi." "Nearest taxi's about 50 miles away," Jack interrupted gently. "And you're not imposing. I've got a responsibility to make sure you and Emma are all right." "You've already done more than enough. Last night, the blanket, this chair—" Sarah's voice caught. "Most people wouldn't have even opened their door. Most people haven't spent 40 years watching out for new life." Jack's tone held no judgment, just quiet certainty. The chair was gathering dust anyway. Martha would have liked seeing it used again. Emma chose that moment to let out a surprisingly loud burp, making them both laugh. The tension eased, and Sarah found herself relaxing further into the chair's embrace. "Tell me about her," Sarah said, nodding toward the collection of framed photos on the wall. Martha's smile radiated from several of them, bright and unfading. Jack's eyes softened. She was a teacher, elementary school, had more patience than any 3 saints put together. He paused, lost in memory, always taking in strays, kids, animals, even the occasional wayward husband who needed straightening out. Sarah looked down at Emma, now sleeping peacefully. "She sounds wonderful." "She was." Jack stood, refilling their coffee cups. "And she'd be the first to insist you stay until you're stronger. There's a decent doctor in town, keeps things quiet when needed. No paperwork if that's a concern." Sarah's hands tightened slightly around Emma. "Why are you being so kind?" "Because 20 years ago, I had to watch someone I loved suffer alone." Jack's voice was matter of fact. "And Martha would never forgive me if I let that happen to someone else." The rocking chair creaked steadily as Sarah considered his words. Outside, morning chores were calling. She could hear animals stirring, demanding their share of attention. This tiny bubble of peace couldn't last forever. But maybe, just for a little while. "Thank you," she whispered, not trusting her voice with more. Jack simply nodded and headed for the door. "Rest, both of you. I'll be back once I've seen to the horses." Left alone, Sarah closed her eyes and focused on Emma's warm weight against her chest, the chair's gentle motion, the distant sounds of ranch life continuing undisturbed. For the first time in months, she felt her guards lowering, if only slightly. Emma sighed in her sleep, one tiny hand clutching the soft fabric of Martha's old quilt. Whatever came next, this moment, this simple, perfect moment, would stay with Sarah forever. Jack hadn't meant to discover her secret. He'd simply been catching up on news while Sarah and Emma napped upstairs, scrolling through his tablet's local headlines over a late afternoon coffee. But there it was, buried in the business section. Taylor Tech CEO still missing after corporate scandal. The woman in the photo wore designer clothes and a confident smile. But those eyes, he'd seen them just hours ago, filled with tears and triumph as she held her newborn. Sarah Taylor, tech industry prodigy, who'd built a billion-dollar empire from a garage startup. The same Sarah who now slept in his guest room, wearing his late wife's borrowed robe. The article painted a complicated picture. 6 months ago, Sarah had vanished after a devastating corporate takeover attempt. Her fiancé, James Harrison, had allegedly sold company secrets to competitors. The resulting chaos had cost shareholders millions, though proof of wrongdoing remained elusive. "She'll need fresh towels," Jack muttered, closing the tablet. Upstairs, floorboards creaked as he gathered linens from the hallway closet, mind turning over this new information. The woman he'd read about, the one who'd testified before Congress about tech industry reform, who'd launched satellites and revolutionized rural internet access, seemed worlds away from the exhausted mother who'd appeared at his gate. But the quiet determination, the way she held herself even in crisis, those fit both versions of Sarah. A soft cry from the guest room interrupted his thoughts. He knocked gently, waiting for Sarah's tired "come in" before entering. "Thought you might need these," he said, setting the towels on a chair. Emma was awake, making small fussy sounds as Sarah changed her. "You're a lifesaver." Sarah's smile was genuine but guarded. She was wearing the clothes she'd arrived in, now cleaned and dried. "We should probably think about heading to town soon." Jack watched her efficient movements, noting how she'd already memorized the best way to swaddle. Emma using Martha's blanket. "No rush. Storm likely took out some power lines. Town'll be chaos for a day or two." Sarah's shoulders relaxed slightly, but her eyes remained wary. "I can't keep imposing—" "Young lady," Jack interrupted, his tone gentle but firm. "I've got 4 empty bedrooms, more food than one man needs, and a solemn duty to make sure that baby thrives." "You're not imposing." He didn't mention the article, didn't ask about the empire she'd built or the betrayal that had brought her to his door. Instead, he focused on practical matters. "Dr. Jenkins comes out this way Thursdays anyway, checking. On the Henderson place. I'll give her a call, have her stop by. No paperwork, no fuss." Sarah finished buttoning Emma's onesie, another item Jack had quietly retrieved from a box of baby clothes Martha had saved for some future they never got. "Why are you doing all this?" "Because it's needed." Jack kept his voice matter-of-fact. "And because 20 years ago, I learned the hard way that sometimes people need a safe place to land." He moved to the window, adjusting the shade against the late afternoon sun. A familiar newspaper clipping caught his eye, one he'd saved years ago when Martha's school had won a state teaching award. The photo showed her surrounded by students, that same nurturing spirit Sarah now needed. "My wife," he said slowly, "used to say that trust works both ways. You trust someone by accepting their help. They trust you by giving it. Simple as that." Sarah cradled Emma closer, her business-trained mind clearly working through implications and possibilities. "And if someone betrays that trust, then they have to live with that choice." Jack turned back from the window. "But that's their burden, not yours." Something shifted in Sarah's expression, a barely perceptible easing of tension she'd probably carried for months. She didn't say anything, but when Jack mentioned making dinner, she didn't bring up leaving again. Later, as sunset painted the ranch in soft colors, Jack added Sarah's article to his small collection of saved clippings. Not because he needed proof of her identity, but because someday Emma might want to know this part of her mother's story. might want to understand the strength it took to choose love and life over empire and influence. For now, though, he had a roast to prepare and a bottle to warm. The rest would sort itself out in time. A week passed. Then two. Spring settled fully over Circle Pine Ranch, bringing with it the scent of fresh earth and new possibilities. Sarah stood in Jack's vegetable garden, an old trowel in her hand, watching Emma sleep peacefully in a makeshift bassinet nearby. "You're holding it wrong," Jack called from the porch, amusement in his voice. He made his way down the worn path, boots leaving slight impressions in the morning damp soil. "There's a wrong way to hold a trowel?" Sarah asked, adjusting her grip on the worn wooden handle. "Martha always said there's a wrong way to do anything if you try hard enough." He demonstrated the correct technique, his weathered hands covering hers briefly to adjust her grip. "Like that. Lets you work longer without tiring." Sarah nodded, surprised at how much better it felt. "I never had a garden before. Nearest I got was the herb box on my penthouse balcony." "Well, you've got 40 acres to practice on now." Jack paused, realizing what he'd implied. "For as long as you're here, of course." Emma stirred, making small, snuffling sounds. Sarah checked on her, tucking Martha's blanket more securely around her daughter. The baby had grown noticeably in just 2 weeks, thriving in the clean mountain air. "I used to think I knew what success looked like," Sarah said, turning back to the garden bed. "Corner office, board meetings, seeing my name in the financial papers. And now?" She gestured to the small row of tomato plants she'd helped transplant that morning. "Now I'm ridiculously proud of these little seedlings. Is that strange?" "Not at all." Jack handed her a packet of bean seeds. "Growth is growth, whether it's in the ground or the stock market." They worked in comfortable silence, breaking new ground for the beans. Sarah found herself falling into an easy rhythm, the repetitive motion soothing in its simplicity, so different from the constant pressure of her former life. "I've been thinking," Jack said eventually, "the south field could use some attention. Been meaning to expand the garden there." Sarah recognized the offer hidden in his words. "That's a big project. Most worthwhile things are." He straightened, stretching his back. "Emma might like having her own vegetable patch when she's older." The image caught Sarah off guard. Emma taking her first steps in this soil, learning to plant seeds, watching things grow. A childhood worlds away from corporate boardrooms and security details. "I don't know the first thing about farming," she admitted. "Nobody does, starting out." Jack picked up a rusty spade, testing its weight. "Martha learned. She was a city girl too, when we met. Thought a hoe was something you called gossipy neighbors." Sarah laughed, the sound carrying across. "The garden," Emma responded with a happy gurgle, and both adults paused to smile at her. "Dr. Jenkins said you're both doing well," Jack mentioned casually. "No need for any follow-up visits unless you want them." Sarah nodded, remembering the kind-faced doctor who'd checked them over without asking uncomfortable questions. Another piece of the sanctuary Jack had quietly built around them. "The business world will be looking for me eventually," she said softly. "When the dust settles, there will be questions. Investigations, probably so." Jack began cleaning his tools. A task she'd learned he did daily. But gardens don't much care about corporate intrigue. Soil's soil, seeds are seeds. He handed her an old wire brush, showing her how to remove dirt from the trowel's crevices. The tool's handle was smooth from years of use, bearing the same gentle patina as everything else on the ranch. "Martha's old garden books are still in the study," he added, "if you're interested." Sarah looked at her daughter, then at the neat rows they'd planted together, then finally at Jack's patient face. I think I'd like that." "Good." He gathered the clean tools, preparing to return them to the shed. "Because those tomatoes you planted will need someone watching over them. Be ashamed to waste all that work." As he walked away, Sarah remained in the garden, listening to the wind in the pines and Emma's soft breathing. Her manicured nails were dirty. Her borrowed jeans had grass stains, and she couldn't remember the last time she'd checked stock prices. Somehow, None of that seemed to matter anymore. The discovery came during spring cleaning. Jack was sorting through a drawer of Martha's old papers when a glossy business card fluttered to the floor. Sarah Taylor, CEO, Taylor Technologies. It read, in elegant silver lettering. He remembered the tech conference Martha had attended years ago, bringing back stories of the young entrepreneur who'd impressed her. "Is Emma asleep?" he called out, hearing Sarah's footsteps in the hallway. Finally, she appeared in the doorway, wiping dust from her hands. Who knew such a tiny person could resist napping so strongly? Jack held up the business card. "Found something that might interest you." Sarah's breath caught as she took the card, fingers tracing her old title. "I remember this conference. I gave a speech about bringing internet access to rural communities." She smiled faintly. "I was so young, so sure I could change the world. Martha said you were impressive, kept that card because she believed in what you were doing." Sarah sank into the old armchair by the window. "We did good things in the beginning. Built networks in places the big companies ignored, developed solar-powered relay stations." She turned the card over. "Then James came along." Jack sat quietly, letting her find her words. "He was brilliant, charming, said all the right things about wanting to help people." Her voice hardened. "I didn't realize he was copying our patents, selling our research to competitors." "The man from the articles," Jack said gently. "Your fiancé." Sarah's eyes met his. "You knew? Read about it that first week you were here. Figured you'd tell me when you were ready." "I trusted him with everything." The card bent slightly in her grip. "The company, my heart, our future." By the time I discovered the truth, he'd already arranged the hostile takeover. Must have been quite a shock. I had choices to make. Fight him in court, watch my life's work torn apart in public. She gestured to her belly, still carrying traces of pregnancy. Then I found out about Emma. Understanding dawned on Jack's face. "You chose her." "I signed away my voting rights, gave up my board seat. The settlements kept things quiet, but..." She shook her head. "James still had friends in high places. There were rumors about criminal charges, investigations. I couldn't risk, so you ran." "I ran." The admission seemed to drain something from her. "Sold everything, converted it to untraceable accounts. Been moving ever since, staying ahead of the questions." Jack reached over and gently took the bent business card, smoothing it carefully. "Martha would say you chose the better part. The company was my whole identity. I built it from nothing, worked 80-hour weeks, sacrificed everything else." Sarah's hand drifted to her chest, where a phantom engagement ring no longer sat. "But when I saw that pregnancy test, suddenly the choice was simple. Love has a way of clarifying things," Jack said quietly. Sarah looked at him sharply. "Is that what made you take us in? Love? Compassion, maybe? Understanding?" He set the card on the windowsill. "When Martha got sick, I had to choose between keeping the ranch running and being with her at the hospital. She made the choice for me, said the animals needed me more than she did." "I'm sorry." "Don't be. She was right, in her way. Life goes on. Things grow. New seasons come." He gestured to the garden visible through the window. "Your tomatoes are proof enough of that." Sarah smiled despite herself. "From tech mogul to gardener, quite a career change." "Way I see it, you're still building things, just different things now." Jack stood, joints creaking slightly. "Speaking of building, that fence in the south pasture won't fix itself. Need help? Wouldn't mind the company." As they walked out together, Sarah paused to check on Emma. The baby slept peacefully, one tiny hand clutching Martha's blanket. On the windowsill, the business card caught the afternoon light, a relic of a past life that somehow seemed less important with each passing day. The old recipe book lay open on the kitchen counter, its pages spotted with age and use. Sarah traced Martha's handwritten notes in the margins. "Add more butter," and "Jack loves this with coffee." 3 months at Circle Pine Ranch had taught her to appreciate these small glimpses into the life that had come before. "I think I'm doing something wrong," she called out, frowning at the lumpy dough before her. "It's not supposed to look like this, is it?" Jack appeared in the doorway, Emma contentedly cradled in one arm. "Biscuits giving you trouble. They're supposed to be light and fluffy. These look more like—" She poked the dense mass. "Well, something you'd use to patch fence posts." He chuckled, settling Emma in her new bassinet, a gift from Dr. Jenkins, who'd become a regular visitor. Martha's first attempt was worse. She used salt instead of sugar, tried to serve them anyway. "Really?" Sarah wiped flour from her cheek, leaving a new streak in its place. "What did you do?" "Ate everyone. Told her they were perfect." His eyes crinkled with the memory. "Course she knew I was lying, but sometimes the trying matters more than the result." Sarah looked down at her failed biscuits, then at the recipe book's worn pages. She wrote so many notes, like she was leaving a trail for someone to follow. That was Martha, always teaching, even when she wasn't meaning to. Jack shifted closer, examining her dough. "Here, let me show you her trick." His hands covered hers, showing how to work the butter into the flour more gently. The kitchen filled with morning sunshine and comfortable silence, broken only by Emma's occasional happy gurgles. "You're good with her," Sarah said, watching Jack make faces at the baby between kneading demonstrations. "Natural, lots of practice. With newborn animals, though I must say Emma's considerably less fussy than most lambs." As if on cue, Emma let out a delighted squeal, her first real laugh. They both froze, then turned to stare at the baby in wonder. "Did she just—" Sarah whispered. "Sure did." Jack's voice was suspiciously gruff. "Must approve of our baking skills." Sarah abandoned the dough to scoop up her daughter, peppering her face with floury kisses. "Clever girl. Oh, look at you, growing so fast." Jack watched them, something soft in his expression. Then he turned back to the counter, efficiently shaping the remaining dough. "Can't let these go to waste. Martha always said a baby's first laugh deserves celebrating." Soon the kitchen filled with the aroma of baking biscuits. Surprisingly, edible ones, thanks to Jack's intervention. Sarah fed Emma while they waited, humming an old lullaby whose words she'd long forgotten. "The church social's coming up next weekend," Jack mentioned casually, setting out butter and honey. "Whole community turns out. Good food, better gossip." Sarah tensed slightly. They hadn't ventured far from the ranch, avoiding public scrutiny. But 3 months had passed without incident, and Emma was growing so fast. "Might be nice," Jack continued, "for folks to meet you proper. No pressure, just if you're interested." Sarah looked around the kitchen. At Martha's recipe book, the fresh biscuits, Emma's contentedly milk-drunk face. At Jack, patient and solid as the mountains outside. "I'll think about it," she said finally. He nodded, accepting her hesitation without judgment. "Biscuits are done. Want to be brave?" The first bite was surprisingly good, light, fluffy, nothing like her initial attempt. Martha's marginal notes had come through after all, with Jack's helping hands. "You know," Sarah said thoughtfully, "I used to have a personal chef, trained in Paris, specialized in haute cuisine, and I think these might be better than anything he ever made." Jack's pleased smile warmed the room more than any oven could. "Martha would say it's because they're made with love." He paused, realizing what he'd said. "That is, she'd be right," Sarah said softly, rescuing him from embarrassment. "Everything's better with love." They finished their breakfast in companionable quiet, Emma drifting off to sleep between them. The recipe book lay open to the next challenge, Martha's famous apple pie, but that could wait. For now, this moment was perfect just as it was. The Millbrook Gazette sat folded on Doc Jenkins's waiting room table, its front page featuring the usual small-town fare, school board meetings, church socials, and local achievements. But it was the small article in the corner that caught Sarah's eye. "Mystery woman at Circle Pine Ranch sparks local interest." She felt Jack shift beside her, his shoulder brushing hers as he leaned in to read. Emma slept peacefully in her carrier, unaware of her mother's sudden tension. "Small towns," he muttered apologetically. "People notice things." The article was mostly speculation. painting a romantic picture of the unknown woman and baby who'd appeared at the historic ranch. The writer seemed more interested in Jack's bachelor status than any connection to distant corporate scandals. But still, maybe this wasn't a good idea, Sarah whispered, glancing at the empty reception desk. Doc Jenkins is discreet. Besides, Jack's voice held gentle humor, according to this, you're either a long-lost relative or a romance novelist seeking inspiration. Take your pick. Despite her anxiety, Sarah smiled. Romance novelist? Really? Well, you do spend a lot of time in the garden looking thoughtful, very artistic. Their quiet laughter drew a curious look from an elderly man across the waiting room. Sarah instinctively turned away, but Jack simply nodded a greeting. Morning, Mr. Peterson. How's that hip doing? Can't complain more than usual, Jack. The old man's eyes twinkled, though I see you've got better company than last time I saw. You! Before Sarah could panic, Doc Jenkins appeared in the doorway. Sarah! Come on back. Jack, you mind watching the little one? The examination was quick but thorough. Sarah had grown to appreciate the doctor's no-nonsense manner and careful avoidance of paperwork. Everything's healing perfectly, Jenkins announced, making a few notes in a private notebook. Though I expect you knew that already. Sarah nodded, adjusting her clothes. The walking helps, and the gardening. Jack mentioned you've quite a green thumb. Jenkins gave her a measured look. He's different since you arrived, you know. More alive. We're not. None of my business, of course. The doctor smiled. But as someone who's known Jack Morrison for 30 years, I'd say you're good for him. Both of you. In the waiting room, they found Jack entertaining Emma, who had woken and was attempting to grab his beard. Mr. Peterson had gone, but a few more patients had arrived, all trying not to stare too obviously. Ready for phase 2? Jack asked, carefully transferring Emma back to her carrier. Sarah took a deep breath. They needed supplies, and the ranch's pantry was running low. It was time to face the town properly. The spring air was crisp as they walked down Millbrook's main street. Emma drew most of the attention, earning coos and admiring glances from passers-by. Sarah kept her head down, but Jack seemed to know everyone, exchanging greetings and brief updates about ranch life. At the general store, Mrs. Henderson practically bubbled with excitement at finally meeting them. Jack Morrison, you've been holding out on us. Such a beautiful baby. Emma takes after her mama, Jack said simply, his hand finding the small of Sarah's back in silent support. They were examining fresh produce when Sarah overheard two women whispering nearby. Saw her picture somewhere before. Looks like that tech person from the news. Jack smoothly steered their cart down another aisle, engaging Sarah in a detailed discussion about canning supplies. His steady presence helped calm her racing heart. Almost done, he murmured. You're doing great. At the checkout, Mrs. Henderson insisted on adding a hand-knitted baby bonnet to their purchases. On the house, she said firmly. We take care of our own here. Sarah clutched the small gift, unexpectedly moved by the simple acceptance in those words. The drive home was quiet, Emma sleeping again after her big adventure. Sarah unfolded the newspaper she'd taken from the doctor's office, rereading the article about their presence at the ranch. Should we be worried? She finally asked. Jack kept his eyes on the dusty road. Town's full of stories. War hero who never talks about the war. Artist who lost her mind painting the mountains. They'll speculate, then find something new to gossip about. And if they figure out who I really am, then we'll deal with it. He glanced at her. Unless you're planning to leave? Sarah looked back at Emma, then at the hand-knitted bonnet, at Jack's strong hands on the steering wheel, guiding. Owed them home. No, she said softly, not planning on leaving. His smile was worth all the whispers in the world. The stack of legal documents arrived in Dr. Jenkins' afternoon mail, printouts of online business news and court filings that made her heart sink. She called Jack immediately, breaking her usual rule about patient confidentiality. They're getting closer, she warned. The business papers are running stories again. Which was how Sarah found herself sitting in Jack's study that evening. Emma asleep upstairs, reading headlines she'd been avoiding for months. Taylor tech stock soars under new management. Former CEO's disappearance raises questions. And, most worryingly, Harrison claims Taylor took proprietary information. "He's lying," she said, hands shaking as she set down the papers. "Everything I took was mine. Personal accounts, family inheritance." Jack stood at the window, watching storm clouds gather over the mountains. "He's trying to smoke you out." "The investigators are focusing on rural areas now." Sarah gestured to a detailed article. "They know I wouldn't go to the cities. They're checking hospital records, birth certificates." Good thing Emma wasn't born in a hospital then. Sarah managed a weak smile. "Silver linings." Thunder rumbled in the distance, and Jack moved to close the window. As he did, Emma's cry drifted down from upstairs. Sarah started to rise, but Jack waved her back. "I'll get her. You keep reading." Alone with the documents, Sarah forced herself to study James's claims carefully. He was painting her as an unstable element, someone who'd cracked under pressure and stolen company secrets. The fact that she'd disappeared while pregnant only added fuel to the speculation. Emma's cries quieted, replaced by the soft sound of Jack's voice, singing an old cowboy lullaby. The contrast between her two worlds had never felt starker. A photo accompanied one of the articles. James at a press conference, looking polished and concerned. "We just want to make sure she's safe," the caption quoted him saying. "Sarah's been under tremendous stress." "Liar," she whispered to his printed face. But he'd always been good at lying, at making people believe what he wanted them to believe. Jack's footsteps on the stairs announced his return. "She just wanted some company, already back asleep." "She said her first word today," Sarah said suddenly, "while you were checking the north fence. She looked right at the house and said, 'Home.'" Jack settled into the chair across from her. "That's quite a first word. I've been running for so long." Sarah gathered the scattered papers into a neat pile. "Maybe it's time to stop. That's your choice to make. But remember, running and hiding aren't the same thing." A particularly loud thunderclap made the windows rattle. Sarah jerked instinctively, and Jack's hand found hers across the desk. "When Martha got sick," he said quietly, "everyone had opinions about what we should do. Move to the city, try experimental treatments, sell the ranch to pay for specialists. But she knew what she wanted, to stay here where she'd built her life." "Did you ever regret following her choice?" "Not once." His thumb traced small circles on her palm. "Sometimes standing your ground is braver than running." Sarah looked down at their joined hands. "The publicity would affect you too. The ranch, your privacy, place could use some excitement. Been too quiet these past 20 years. Despite everything," she laughed. "A corporate scandal and a missing CEO is your idea of excitement?" "Well, I was thinking more about Emma's first steps, her first day of school." His eyes met hers. "But I suppose we could handle the other stuff too, if we had to." The storm was directly overhead now, but inside the study, surrounded by evidence of her past life, Sarah felt strangely peaceful. Emma was saying home. Jack was offering to face her battles with her. And somewhere in the mix of fear and gratitude and something warmer, a decision was crystallizing. "I'll need a lawyer," she said finally. "A good one. Doc Jenkins has a son in corporate law, very discreet, very thorough." "Of course he did." Sarah squeezed his hand. "Thank you for everything." "Don't thank me yet. Wait till you see what all this excitement does to my blood pressure." Outside, the storm began to ease, but they stayed there in the study, hands linked across the desk, planning their stand against the gathering threat. The family photo album was heavy in Sarah's lap, its leather cover soft with age. Night had settled over the ranch, and Emma was finally asleep after a long day of almost crawling attempts. Jack sat beside Sarah on the porch swing, the warm evening, wrapping around them like a blanket. "Martha insisted on documenting everything," he said, turning a page to reveal younger versions of himself. Said memories fade, but photographs keep stories alive. Sarah traced a photo of Jack and Martha on their wedding day, both radiantly young. You looked so happy. We were. Didn't have much, but we had dreams. His shoulder pressed against hers as he pointed to another image. That's the day we bought the ranch. Bank thought we were crazy, 2 kids taking on all this land. Were you scared? Terrified? He chuckled. But Martha had this way of making impossible things seem possible. The album told their story in fading colors. Their first cattle drive, the garden's first harvest, holidays and ordinary moments captured forever. Sarah paused at a photo of Martha in the schoolroom, surrounded by children. She would have loved Emma, Jack said softly. I think she's still here in a way. Sarah gestured to the ranch around them. In the garden, the recipe book, the way you keep her memories alive. Their eyes met in the gathering dusk. Something shifted in the air between them, heavy with unspoken feelings. Sarah, I know who you are, she interrupted gently. I've known since that first week. Jack stilled beside her. The articles. Yes. She turned another page, buying time. Why didn't you say anything? Same reason you didn't run when you realized I knew. Some things need time to find their own way. Sarah closed the album, setting it aside. I've been so afraid of being found, of losing Emma, of trusting the wrong person again. But here with you, she took a shaky breath. I feel safe. You are safe. His hand found hers in the darkness. Both of you. Jack, her voice wavered. I think I'm falling in love with you. The porch swing creaked as he turned to face her. Think I'm already there. Their first kiss was gentle, tentative, carrying the weight of past losses and new beginnings. When they parted, Sarah rested her forehead against his. What happens now? Now? Jack's voice held a smile. Now we make our own memories for that album, if that's what you want. A cry from upstairs interrupted her answer. Emma, right on schedule. I'll go, Jack said, but Sarah held him back. Together? He helped her up, keeping her hand in his. The album lay forgotten on the swing, but its story was still unfolding. As they climbed the stairs to comfort Emma, Sarah felt the last pieces of her old life falling away, replaced by something stronger, truer. This wasn't the ending she'd expected when she'd driven through that storm 6 months ago. It was better. It was home. The burner phone rang at midnight, shattering the ranch's peaceful silence. Sarah fumbled for it in her bedside drawer, heart pounding. Only one person had this number. Marcus, her former legal counsel and the only person from her past she still trusted. They're moving, he said without preamble. Harrison filed an emergency injunction. He's claiming you took proprietary AI algorithms when you left. Sarah sat up, clutching the phone. That's impossible. I deliberately left all company property behind. He's saying you memorized key components, claims you're planning to sell them to competitors. Marcus's voice crackled with barely contained anger. The judge granted a freeze on all your remaining assets. Through the wall, Sarah could hear Emma stirring. Jack's low voice followed, soothing their daughter back to sleep. The contrast between her peaceful present and turbulent past made her chest ache. Marcus, those algorithms were mine. I wrote them in college, before the company even existed. I know, but Harrison's team has done a good job muddying the waters. They're pushing for criminal charges, Sarah. Corporate espionage. She closed her eyes, remembering long nights coding, building something from nothing. James had watched her create it all, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. A soft knock at her door. Jack stood there, concern etched on his face. She gestured him in, putting the phone on speaker. What are our options? She asked Marcus. You need to fight back publicly. The longer you stay hidden, the more it looks like guilt. Jack settled beside her on the bed, his solid presence anchoring her. If I go public, I risk losing Emma, Sarah said. James knows that's my weakness. He'll use it. He's already using it. There are rumors you had a mental breakdown, that the pregnancy was unstable. He's painting himself as the concerned ex trying to help you. Jack's hand found hers, squeezing gently. She drew strength from his touch. What about proof? He asked. speaking for the first time. Surely there's evidence of when these algorithms were created. Jack Morrison, Sarah explained to Marcus. He's family now. A pause on the line. Good. You need allies. And yes, there might be proof. Your old college laptop. The one you kept in the Manhattan apartment safe. If we could access the original code. I don't have the laptop anymore. I left everything when I ran. No, Marcus said slowly, but I know where it is. Harrison's team took possession of your personal effects, claiming they might contain company property. They're in storage at the law firm. Sarah straightened. You could get to them. Maybe, but it's risky. If I'm caught, then don't, she said firmly. I won't let anyone else risk their career for me. Jack cleared his throat. What if there was another way, something that didn't put Marcus at risk? They both looked at him. This Harrison fellow, he's counting on Sarah staying hidden, right? Using her absence to control the narrative? Jack's voice held the same calm certainty he used when planning ranch operations. So, what if we change the narrative? Marcus sounded intrigued. What are you suggesting? Sarah Taylor, successful CEO, doesn't hide. She strategizes. Maybe it's time to remind people of that. Sarah felt a plan forming. The Technological Rights Conference next month. It's in Denver. Perfect platform, Marcus agreed. But Harrison will be there. Good, Sarah's voice hardened. Let him see what happens when you corner a mother protecting her child. After finalizing details with Marcus, she ended the call. The burner phone felt heavy in her hand, a link to her past life that suddenly seemed less threatening. You don't have to do this alone, Jack said quietly. Sarah touched his face, rough with evening stubble. I know. That's what gives me courage. Through the wall, Emma made a soft sound in her sleep. Their daughter, who deserved a mother who fought back rather than just ran away. We'll need help, she said. The ranch, Emma. Doc Jenkins has been hinting about taking a vacation. I suspect she'd be happy to stay here. Sarah leaned into him, drawing comfort from his steadiness. I'm tired of running. Then don't run. He kissed her forehead. Stand and fight. I'll be right beside you. The burner phone lay silent now, but its message had changed everything. The time for hiding was over. The ranch deed lay on Jack's desk, its edges worn with age. Sarah stared at it, shaking her head. I can't let you do this. Not asking permission. Jack's voice was gentle but firm. The south pasture alone is worth enough to fund your legal fight. And it's just sitting there growing grass. Marcus's face on the laptop screen showed concern. Mr. Morrison, with all due respect, leveraging your property is a significant risk. So is letting an innocent woman lose everything. Jack pulled out another document, a recent land appraisal. Besides, I've been thinking about diversifying anyway. Time this old place earned its keep. Sarah touched the deed's faded paper. Jack, I did some research, he continued as if he hadn't heard her protest. Solar farms are big business now. That south pasture gets perfect exposure. Marcus leaned forward, interest piqued. Solar farming? Sarah, didn't Taylor Tech have a renewable energy division before James sold it off? She straightened, mind racing. The patents were mine originally. Personal research, pre-company. Which means, Marcus was typing rapidly. Yes, here it is. The sale might be vulnerable to challenge. If we can prove the original ownership, Jack spread out a survey map. 200 acres of prime solar exposure, almost like someone planned it. Sarah looked between these two men, one from her past life, one from her present, and felt pieces clicking into place. We could rebuild, not just fight back, but create something new. The local angle would play well, Marcus mused. Tech CEO finds new purpose, bringing renewable energy to rural communities. It's a compelling narrative. More than that, Sarah's eyes were bright with possibility. It's legitimate business, something that could support Emma's future, help the community, and give those corporate vultures something to choke on, Jack added mildly. Doc Jenkins, who'd been quietly taking notes, spoke up. The town council would support it. They've been looking for economic development opportunities. Sarah turned to Jack. But the ranch? It's your home, your legacy. Ranch isn't going anywhere. He traced the property lines on the map, just growing in a different direction. Martha always said change keeps things alive. Marcus cleared his throat. We'll need to move fast. The conference is in 3 weeks and Harrison's team won't waste time once you surface. Then let's give them something to think about. Sarah pulled her laptop closer. I'll need access to my old research files. The ones Harrison doesn't know about. Already on it. Marcus held up a flash drive. Backup copies stored in my personal safe. Never trust a tech company not to accidentally delete inconvenient files. Jack stood, stretching his back. I'll make some calls. Got a friend in the renewable energy business, might have insights. As the others focused on their tasks, Sarah studied the ranch deed again. 20 years ago, Jack and Martha had signed this paper, dreaming of cattle and crops. Now it might help forge a different kind of future. You're Martha, she said softly. To Jack, when the others were distracted, would she understand? He covered her hand with his. She'd say we're growing something new, different crop, same purpose. Doc Jenkins approached with more coffee. Town's already buzzing about you two, you know. Might as well give them something real to talk about. Speaking of talk, Marcus looked up from his laptop. Sarah, we should discuss your public statement. The conference organizers will want an abstract. She nodded, professional instincts resurging. We'll need to be careful, strategic. That's my department, Doc Jenkins said firmly. I'll handle the local press. Small-town papers love a good David versus Goliath story. The afternoon stretched into evening as they refined their plans. Emma's baby monitor transmitted peaceful breathing, a reminder of what they were fighting for. One more thing, Jack said as they wrapped up. When this goes public, there might be cameras, reporters. Probably, Sarah admitted. I'm sorry. Don't be. Just thinking we might need to paint the front fence. Can't have the ranch looking shabby on national news. She laughed, tension breaking. That's what you're worried about? Well, that and whether I own a suit that still fits. Figured I should look proper standing beside you. Sarah's heart swelled. Here was a man willing to sell his land, face media scrutiny, and buy a new suit, all to help her fight back. How had she gotten so lucky? Marcus was smiling on the screen. I'll have the preliminary paperwork ready tomorrow. And Sarah, it's good to see you looking like yourself again. She realized he was right. The woman who'd arrived here desperate and afraid was gone. In her place was someone stronger, part CEO, part mother, part rancher's partner. Tomorrow then, she agreed. Time to remind James what happens when you underestimate a tailor. A Taylor Morrison, Jack corrected quietly. If you're amenable. Sarah's answer was in her kiss. The TV remote shook in Sarah's hand as she changed channels. Every news station carried the same headline. Missing tech CEO found, Sarah Taylor surfaces in rural Montana. Emma fussed in her playpen, picking up on her mother's tension. You don't have to watch, Jack said, reaching for the remote. Yes, I do. Sarah's voice was firm. Need to know what we're dealing with. The ranch's driveway was already filling with news vans, their satellite dishes pointed skyward like mechanical flowers. Doc Jenkins stood guard at the gate, turning. Away reporters with practiced small-town courtesy. Sources say Taylor has been living at Circle Pine Ranch, a reporter announced. The historic ranch sign clearly visible behind her. Local residents describe a romantic connection with ranch owner Jack Morrison. Jack snorted. Romantic connection? That what they're calling it? Shh! Sarah leaned forward as James's face filled the screen. Of course, we're relieved she's safe, he said, all corporate concern. Sarah's behavior has been erratic since the pregnancy. We just want to help. The remote creaked in Sarah's grip. Help yourself to my company, you mean? In related news, another channel reported. Taylor Tech stock dropped 15 points following revelations of Sarah Taylor's renewable energy venture plans. A cry from upstairs interrupted the broadcast. Doc Jenkins appeared in the doorway, Emma in her arms. Someone's ready for lunch. Sarah muted the TV, reaching for her daughter. The simple act of nursing helped calm her nerves, grounding her in what really mattered. "Marcus called," Jack said, returning from the kitchen. "Your old college laptop proved very interesting. Original timestamps on those algorithms, all predating the company." "James knows that," Sarah said quietly. "He's counting on public perception. Missing pregnant CEO, messy breakup. He thinks he can paint me as unstable." A commotion outside drew their attention. Through the window, they could see more vehicles arriving. Not just news vans now, but expensive cars with corporate logos. Taylor Tech lawyers. Sarah recognized them, right on schedule. Jack's hand found her shoulder. "You ready for this?" Before she could answer, Emma pulled away from nursing, looked straight at the window, and said clearly, "No." Despite everything, they both laughed. "Smart girl," Jack said proudly. Doc Jenkins peered through the curtains. "Getting crowded out there. Might need to call Sheriff Davis for crowd control." As if on cue, the sound of sirens approached. But when Sarah looked outside, she saw something unexpected. The sheriff's car was leading a procession of ranch trucks and personal vehicles, their neighbors, forming a barrier between the media circus and the ranch house. "Well, would you look at that?" Doc Jenkins smiled. "Told you small towns take care of their own." Mrs. Henderson's minivan was particularly noticeable, parked sideways to block photographers. Through the window, Sarah could see her calmly knitting, shooting stern looks at any reporter who ventured too close. "Your property rights seminar at the Grange Hall last month is paying off," Jack told Sarah. "They remember who helped them, understand their solar lease options." Sarah blinked back tears. These people barely knew her, yet here they were, standing guard over her sanctuary. The TV, still muted, showed James giving another statement. Sarah finally turned it off completely, setting the remote aside. "He'll come here himself," she said. "Once he realizes the media attention is working in our favor. Let him come." Jack's voice held that same steady certainty that had calmed her through birth and storm. "Think it's time James Harrison learned about Montana hospitality." Emma, perhaps sensing the shifting mood, reached for Jack. As he took her, Sarah watched them together. This man, who'd become more of a father to Emma in months than James had bothered to be during her entire pregnancy. "I should be terrified," she realized aloud, "but somehow I'm not. Because you're not alone anymore." Doc Jenkins began gathering her things. "Now, I'm heading to town for supplies. Any reporters want interviews, they can talk to me about proper prenatal care in rural settings. Should keep them busy." Through the window, Sarah watched more townspeople arriving, thermoses of coffee and folding chairs, suggesting they were settling in for the long haul. The sight gave her an idea. "Jack, remember what you said about painting the fence?" He raised an eyebrow. "Planning a renovation in the middle of all this?" "No." A smile tugged at her lips. "Planning a statement, one James won't expect." Outside, the media circus grew, but inside their fortress of community support, Sarah finally felt ready to fight back. Not just for herself or Emma, but for everyone who'd helped build this new life worth defending. Sarah's old engagement ring felt heavy in her palm, 5 carats of flawless diamond that had once represented everything she thought she wanted. Now it seemed gaudy, out of place among the ranch's honest simplicity. "You sure about this?" Jack asked, watching her study the ring. "Marcus says we'll need every resource for the legal battle ahead." She placed the ring in its velvet box. "Besides, it's time to let go of the past." The jeweler in town had already agreed to handle the sale privately. The funds would help fight James's injunctions, though Sarah suspected her ex-fiancé would enjoy the symbolic gesture even more than the legal advantage. Outside, the media circus had grown, but so had their defenders. The entire town seemed to have rallied around them, forming a protective barrier of pickup trucks and lawn chairs. Mrs. Henderson had organized a rotation of volunteers, complete with packed lunches and thermoses of coffee. "It's time," Marcus said from the laptop screen. "The press conference is set up." Sarah nodded, smoothing her simple blue dress. No power suits or stilettos today. She wasn't that person anymore. Ready? Jack asked softly. With you? Always. They stepped onto the porch together, Emma secure in Jack's arms. The camera flashes were immediate, questions overlapping in a chaotic surge. Miss Taylor, why did you disappear? Is it true about the stolen algorithms? Mr. Morrison, how long has Miss Taylor been hiding at your ranch? Sarah raised a hand, and to her surprise the noise subsided. She still had that effect, it seemed. My name is Sarah Taylor. 6 months ago I discovered my fiancé had betrayed not just my trust, but the trust of everyone who believed in Taylor Technologies. When I learned I was pregnant, I chose to protect my child from what I knew would become a media circus. More questions erupted, but she pressed on. I did not steal company property. The algorithms in question were my personal work, developed years before Taylor Tech existed. I have proof of this, which my legal team will be happy to share. What about your mental state? A reporter called out. Mr. Harrison claims James Harrison, Sarah's voice could have frozen fire, is welcome to explain his own actions to the SEC investigators. I'm sure they'll be particularly interested in certain offshore accounts I recently remembered. Jack stepped forward, his presence solid and reassuring. If you're suggesting that choosing to have her baby in peace somehow implies instability, I invite you to spend a few days working the ranch. Might adjust your perspective on what really matters in life. A ripple of appreciative laughter came from the townspeople. Even some reporters smiled. Ms. Taylor, what are your plans now? Sarah exchanged a look with Jack. Circle Pine Ranch. We'll be partnering with local landowners to develop sustainable solar farming initiatives. We'll be bringing clean energy jobs to rural communities that bigger companies have ignored. And your relationship with Mr. Morrison? Jack answered that one. Well, seems to me when a man and woman raise a child together, build a business together, and face down corporate vultures together, that makes them family. Emma chose that moment to reach for Sarah, announcing, Mama, clear as day. The cameras went wild, but Sarah barely noticed. She was too busy watching Jack's face as he handed their daughter over. The love there was worth more than any diamond. One last question, a younger reporter called out. The ring, Ms. Taylor. You're not wearing your engagement ring. Sarah smiled. No, I'm not. Some things are worth more than diamonds. Like a man who opens his door to a stranger in a storm, who helps deliver her baby, who teaches her that real love isn't about possession. It's about letting someone bloom in their own way. She reached for Jack's hand. The ring is being sold. The proceeds will help fund legal aid for rural communities dealing with predatory land development. Seems fitting, don't you think? The questions continued, but Sarah felt lighter. The truth was out now, all of it. No more hiding, no more running. Later, when the reporters had gone and dusk was settling over the ranch, Jack found her in the garden. You know, he said casually, Martha left me her mother's ring. Nothing fancy, just a simple band with a small stone. She said to save it, for when it felt right. Sarah looked up from her tomato plants. Jack Morrison, are you proposing to me in the middle of a corporate scandal? Seems as good a time as any. His eyes crinkled. Besides, according to the news, we're already practically married. She stood, brushing dirt from her knees. Ask me properly. And there, among the growing things they'd planted together, he did. The court documents arrived by courier on a bright autumn morning. Emma was taking wobbly first steps in the ranch yard, determined to reach the flower bed she'd helped Sarah plant. Jack stood ready to catch her if needed, but their daughter had inherited her mother's determination. It's done, Sarah said, reading through the papers. The judge threw out all of James's claims. Jack scooped up Emma as she stumbled. The algorithms, officially recognized as my personal intellectual property, developed pre-company. She turned a page. And there's more. The SEC investigation uncovered everything. The offshore accounts, the secret deals, all of it. Emma squirmed to be put down, demanding walk in her increasingly vocal way. Just like her mama, Jack said proudly. Never stays down for long. Sarah spread the documents on the porch table, each page representing another victory. The evidence had been overwhelming once they knew where to look. James's carefully constructed facade had crumbled under scrutiny. "He's facing criminal charges," she said, still processing the news. "Securities fraud, corporate espionage, tax evasion. Guess karma does exist." Jack steadied Emma as she took another determined step, though I suspect karma had some help from Marcus and his team. Sarah smiled, remembering the late nights of preparation, the detailed forensic accounting, the carefully gathered testimonies from former employees. The whole thing would have collapsed without my old laptop. The original timestamps saved us. Speaking of saving, Jack nodded toward the driveway, where Doc Jenkins's car was approaching. The doctor emerged with a newspaper in hand, grinning broadly. "Thought you might want to see this?" The headline read, "Taylor Vindicated. Tech CEO's Return Sparks Rural Innovation." Below was a photo of their first solar panel installation in the South Pasture, Sarah and Jack standing proudly beside local farmers. "Page 3 is better," Doc Jenkins said, flipping the paper. Harrison led away in handcuffs. Former tech executive faces multiple federal charges. Sarah touched the image of her ex-fiancé, his polished appearance now marred by obvious distress. "I almost feel sorry for him." "Don't waste your energy," Jack advised. "Some people make their own beds." Emma reached the flower bed at last, plopping down triumphantly among the blooms. Her delighted laugh drew their attention away from past troubles to present joy. "The Taylor Tech Board is in chaos," Sarah noted, returning to the court documents. "They're asking me to return as CEO." Jack stilled beside her. "That's what you wanted, isn't it? To reclaim your company?" It was. She gathered the papers, movements decisive. "But I've got a different company now, one that's actually helping people, not just chasing stock prices. The solar initiative is just the beginning." Her eyes sparkled with familiar entrepreneurial fire. "Rural communities need tech infrastructure, sustainable development, educational resources. Everything we're doing here could be replicated across the country." Doc Jenkins cleared her throat. "Speaking of development, the town council approved your proposal. The old Miller property is yours if you want it." Sarah's smile widened. "Perfect location for the training center. Local farmers can learn about renewable energy implementation, sustainable practices, and Sarah Taylor becomes a different kind of CEO," Jack finished. "One who builds communities instead of just computers." "Sarah Taylor Morrison," she corrected, reaching for his hand. "Assuming you haven't changed your mind about the wedding." "Not a chance." He pulled her close, Emma crawling over to join their embrace, "though we might want to wait until the media circus dies down." "Too late." Doc Jenkins held up her phone, showing social media exploding with news of their engagement. "Small towns talk, remember?" Sarah laughed, beyond caring about public scrutiny. The court documents represented more than just legal victory. They were her declaration of independence. From James, from corporate politics, from everything that had nearly destroyed her. "You know," she said thoughtfully, "we should frame these papers, hang them right next to Martha's teaching awards." Jack understood immediately. "Another chapter in the ranch's story?" "In our story," Sarah corrected, watching Emma explore her flowers with fearless curiosity. "Speaking of which, have you seen the latest property valuations since we installed the solar array?" Doc Jenkins excused herself, recognizing the gleam in Sarah's eye, the one that meant business plans were about to be born. "I married a force of nature," Jack said proudly. "Not yet, you haven't." Sarah gathered Emma up, breathing in her flower-scented curls. But soon, 2 keys lay on Jack's desk, one sleek and modern for her restored Manhattan penthouse, one worn and familiar for the ranch house. Sarah stood at the window, watching Emma chase butterflies in the garden, while Jack mended a fence nearby. "The board is getting impatient," Marcus said through the laptop speaker. They're offering full reinstatement, complete control, everything you lost and more. Sarah picked up the penthouse key, its weight familiar yet strange now. And what about the rural initiatives? They'll support your philanthropic interests. Of course. Good PR. Marcus paused. Sarah, this is what we fought for. Your company, your legacy. My legacy? She watched Jack lift Emma onto his shoulders, their daughter's laughter carrying through the open window. I'm looking at my legacy right now. You can have both. Split your time between Montana and Manhattan. Private jets make it easy enough. The ranch key felt warm in her palm, smoothed by years of use. Jack had given it to her the morning after their engagement, casual as could be. About time you had your own, he'd said. What about the training center? She asked Marcus. The solar farm expansion? The board would prefer you focus on core tech development. They're willing to sell the rural division. No. The word came out sharp, certain. Those projects aren't negotiable. Emma's voice floated in. Papa, look! Butterfly! Sarah's heart squeezed. When had Emma started calling Jack Papa? The transition had been so natural, she couldn't pinpoint the moment. Sarah, Marcus said gently, I know you've built something special there, but Taylor Tech is your baby too. The company needs you. No, it doesn't. She set down the penthouse. It needs what I represent, stability, innovation, positive press. But there are other ways to achieve that. What are you suggesting? A partnership. Taylor Tech provides infrastructure and technical support for rural development projects. Circle Pine Renewables handles implementation and training. Two separate companies working together. Silence from Marcus as he processed this. You'd give up being CEO? I'd be CEO of something better. Sarah's voice held the same conviction that had once built a tech empire. Do you know what the projected growth rate is for rural solar implementation? Or how many communities are desperate for sustainable development? The board won't like it. The board will love the tax benefits and PR opportunities. Plus, she smiled, they don't really have a choice. Those algorithms are still mine. Through the window, she watched Jack teaching Emma about butterfly species, his patience infinite as she repeated each name in her toddler way. You're really choosing. This, Marcus said, not quite a question. I'm choosing everything. Sarah held up the ranch key. This isn't just a house key, Marcus. It's the key to the life I want. The one I didn't know I needed until a storm brought me here. Jack looked up, catching her watching them. His smile still made her heart skip, even after all these months. Send me the partnership proposal, Marcus sighed. But she could hear his smile. And Sarah, Martha would be proud of you both. After ending the call, Sarah joined her family in the garden. Emma immediately demanded to be transferred from Jack's shoulders to her arms, chattering about butterflies and flowers. Everything. Okay, Jack asked, noting her thoughtful expression. Perfect. She handed him the penthouse key. Could you drop this at the post office? Marcus will know what to do with it. His eyes searched her face. You sure? The ranch key opens everything. I need... She bounced Emma, who was starting to get heavy. Besides, somebody has to keep you from getting too set in your ways. Me? Set in my ways? He pulled them both close. Says the woman who color-codes the garden plots. Organization is essential for optimal growth. She primly quoted one of his own farming lectures back at him. Their laughter mingled with Emma's happy babbling, carrying across the land that had become so much more than a refuge. It was their future, stretching out before them like the endless Montana sky. The business plan spread across the kitchen table, surrounded by coffee cups and Martha's old recipe book. Sarah had written it in the same notebook where she'd first practiced biscuit recipes, which seemed fitting somehow. Circle Pine Innovation Center. Jack read from the cover page. Bringing sustainable technology to rural America. Too ambitious? Sarah asked, bouncing Emma on her hip while stirring something that actually smelled edible on the stove. Not ambitious enough. He flipped through the detailed projections. You're thinking too small. Coming from a man who'd once resisted computerizing his cattle records, this made Sarah laugh. "Now, who's the dreamer?" "Must be your influence." He pointed to a section on educational programs. "We should add virtual classes, reach more communities." Emma squirmed to be put down, toddling toward the cabinet where they kept her toys. At 18 months, she was a force of perpetual motion, equally at home in board meetings and barn visits. "The Taylor Tech partnership is official," Sarah said, checking her source. "Board signed this morning. We'll have full technical support for the training programs." "And you're sure about the name? Could still call it Taylor Technologies Rural Division." Sarah shook her head. "Circle Pine means something, represents what we're building, tradition and innovation growing together." Through the window, they could see the solar array gleaming in the south pasture. The first training session had drawn farmers from 3 states, eager to learn about sustainable energy implementation. Now there was a waiting list. Speaking of building, Jack pulled out another set of plans. "Contractor says the new workshop space will be ready by spring. Perfect timing for the expanded programs." Sarah added fresh herbs to her sauce, all from their garden, which was thriving under their combined care. "Did you see the application numbers? Over 200 for the first quarter. Towns noticed too. Henderson's boy is talking about opening a cafe to handle the lunch crowds. Mrs. Peterson wants to turn her spare rooms into student housing. A regular economic boom." Sarah smiled. "Martha would love seeing the community grow like this. She'd love seeing you in her kitchen more." Jack sampled the sauce, eyebrows rising in surprise. "Actually edible. You're full of surprises, Ms. Taylor Morrison." "Soon to be Mrs. Taylor Morrison," she corrected. Their wedding was set for next month, a small ceremony in the garden where their story had really begun. Emma returned, clutching her favorite toy, a stuffed horse wearing a tiny solar panel backpack, a prototype for their new educational line. "Mama, Papa, hungry?" They settled into their mealtime routine, Emma securely in her high chair between them. The business plan sat alongside their plates, another member of the family. "The Renewable Energy Conference called again," Sarah mentioned, helping Emma with her spoon. "They want us both to keynote." "Both?" Jack looked startled. "I'm no public speaker. You're the heart of this operation, the one who proves that traditional ranching and modern technology can coexist." She reached for his hand. "Besides, your last presentation to the county commission was brilliant. That was different, just talking about things I know." "Exactly." Sarah's eyes sparkled. "You know more than you think. The ranchers trust you, respect your experience, with your practical knowledge and my technical background. We're quite a team," he finished, squeezing her hand. Emma chose this moment to demonstrate her growing vocabulary. "Team!" They both laughed, the sound drawing Doc Jenkins in from the porch where she'd been enjoying evening coffee. "Mail came," she announced, dropping a thick envelope on top of the business plan. "Final permits for the expansion." Sarah opened it eagerly, scanning the contents. "It's all approved. We can break ground next week. Town council's unanimous," Doc Jenkins added. "Though I suspect having the mayor's daughter in your coding class helped." "She's got real talent," Sarah defended. "They all do, just needed someone to notice." Jack gathered the business plan pages, handling them with the same care he showed Martha's recipe book. "Remember that first morning in the garden? You said you didn't know anything about farming. I remember you teaching me the right way to hold a trowel. Look at you now, teaching satellite communications to farmers, growing organic herbs. We're planning solar expansions." He shook his head in wonder, while still finding time to read Emma her bedtime stories. Sarah watched their daughter carefully spooning up dinner, so determined to manage on her own. "We're all growing here, learning new things." "Speaking of learning," Doc Jenkins interjected, "wait until you hear what the school board's proposing. They want to add tech agriculture to the curriculum." The conversation flowed into educational possibilities, community development, future plans. Outside, the sun set behind their solar panels, modern technology framed by ancient mountains. Everything was changing, yet somehow staying true to its roots, just like them. A year to the day after Emma's dramatic arrival, Jack hung a new lantern in the barn. The old one that had lit her birth now held a place of honor in their home, but its successor was special too, a wedding gift from the town, handcrafted by the local metalsmith. Perfect timing, Sarah said, watching him adjust the bracket, the storms rolling in. Sure enough, thunder rumbled in the distance, so similar to that life-changing night. But this time, Sarah stood secure in Jack's arms, their gold rings catching the lantern's light, while Emma played with her toys in a corner of the barn. "Mama, Papa, look!" Their daughter held up a small circuit board, her favorite toy from the educational kits they'd developed. At 2 years old, she was already showing an interest in both technology and ranch life, a perfect blend of her parents' worlds. "Should we tell her?" Jack murmured against Sarah's hair. "Tell me what?" Emma's curiosity was instant. Another trait she'd inherited from her mother. Sarah placed a hand on her stomach, still flat, but holding their newest secret. "How would you like to be a big sister?" Emma's eyes widened. "Baby." "Not for a while yet," Jack said, scooping her up. "But yes, a baby. Your mama and I are pretty good at those beginnings." The lantern's warm glow filled the barn as the first raindrops fell outside. Sarah touched the old wooden walls, remembering her fear and pain that first night, how a stranger's kindness had changed everything. "The conference center's full for next month's session," she said, watching Emma demonstrate circuit basics to her stuffed animals. Farmers from 5 states, plus that delegation from Europe. Martha would never believe it. Jack's voice held pride and wonder. Her reading corner turned into an international education center. "She'd love the garden program best," Sarah said. "Teaching kids about solar-powered irrigation, sustainable farming." "Speaking of programs," Jack interrupted with a grin, "your daughter has an announcement." Emma stood importantly, clearly rehearsed. "I helped Papa with the new baby horse, held the flashlight and everything." "Did you now?" Sarah raised an eyebrow at Jack. "Someone starting early." "Never too early to learn birthing procedures," he said innocently. "Besides, she's a natural, gets that from her mama." The storm intensified outside, but inside their barn, now part of the Circle Pine Innovation Center's hands-on training facility, all was warm and peaceful. Emma returned to her circuits. Jack checked on the newest foal, and Sarah found herself reflecting on the year's changes. The Taylor Tech partnership was thriving, bringing sustainable technology to rural communities across the country. Their training programs had a 6-month waiting list, and 3 more ranches had joined their educational network. But more importantly, they'd built something that honored both progress and tradition. "Papa," Emma called, "tell the story again." Sarah smiled, knowing which story their daughter meant. It had become a favorite bedtime ritual. Jack settled onto a hay bale, pulling Emma into his lap. "Well, one stormy night, just like this one, your mama came looking for shelter." "And you helped her!" Emma bounced excitedly. "Just like helping the baby horses." "That's right. And you know what? It was the best thing I ever did." Sarah joined them, feeling their second child flutter beneath her heart. "Better than winning the Sustainable Agriculture Award?" "Better than everything," Jack said simply, "though watching you accept that award in your gardening boots was pretty special." Emma yawned, the storm and story working their magic. "And then you got married in the flower garden." "And then we got married in the flower garden," Sarah confirmed, smoothing her daughter's hair. "Right where Mama learned to grow tomatoes." The new lantern cast its gentle light over them as Emma drifted to sleep, secure in her father's arms. Outside, cars pulled into the center's parking lot. Early arrivals for tomorrow's workshop on integrated farming techniques. "Should we head back to the house?" Jack whispered. Sarah shook her head, content in this moment. "Let's stay a little longer. Some places just feel right, you know." He did know. It was why he'd never sold the ranch during the hard years after. "Martha died why he'd opened his door to a desperate stranger in a storm, why their love story had bloomed in this soil. The old lantern in their home and this new one in the barn marked the chapters of their journey. From strangers to family, from crisis to triumph, from separate paths to one shared adventure. Emma stirred slightly, murmuring home in her sleep. Outside, the storm began to ease, just as it had that first night. But Sarah and Jack remained in their barn, surrounded by the past and present, while their future grew in Sarah's belly and their firstborn dreamed in their arms. The lantern's light touched everything: the circuit boards and hay bales, the solar panel diagrams and horse blankets, the old ranch ledgers and new smart tablets, a perfect blend, just like them. And in that light, their story continued to unfold, one miracle at a time.